The blood pooling beneath his shoulder was the first thing Clara Anderson noticed when the ranch hand stumbled through the doorway of Dr. Whitmore's medical office on that sweltering August afternoon in 1882. But it was his steel-gray eyes, filled with stubborn determination not to show pain, that she would remember for the rest of her life. "Doctor, we need help." The older cowboy supporting the injured man shouted with genuine panic in his voice. Clara dropped the medical instruments she had been organizing and rushed forward, her practical brown skirt swishing against her ankles as Dr. Whitmore emerged from the back room. "Get him on the table," the doctor commanded, his experienced hands already reaching for clean towels. Clara moved with practiced efficiency, having assisted her father, also a physician, back in Philadelphia before his passing 6 months earlier. The grief still sat heavy in her chest, but she had learned to channel it into purpose, into helping others, which was why she had answered Dr. Whitmore's advertisement for an assistant and traveled all the way to McGill, Nevada. The injured cowboy was tall and broad-shouldered, his sun-bronzed face tight with pain he was clearly trying to hide. His dark brown hair was matted with sweat and dust from the trail, and his shirt was soaked through with blood on the left side. As they laid him on the examination table, his eyes found hers again. "Madam," he managed through gritted teeth, his voice rough but respectful. "Sorry for the mess." "Do not apologize for bleeding," Clara said firmly, already helping Dr. Whitmore cut away the shirt to expose the wound. "Save your strength." The bullet had torn through the muscle of his upper arm, missing the bone but creating a nasty furrow that would need careful cleaning and stitching. The older cowboy who had helped him inside paced nervously near the door. "What happened, Jim?" Dr. Whitmore asked as he examined the wound. "Rustlers hit the Morrison ranch this morning, Doc. Keaton here tried to stop them from making off with a dozen head of cattle. Got shot for his trouble, but he kept them from taking more. Stubborn fool nearly bled out on the ride into town." So his name was Keaton. Clara filed that information away as she handed Dr. Whitmore the instruments he needed, anticipating each step of the process. Her father had taught her well, and she had assisted in countless procedures during the 2 years she had worked alongside him before consumption had stolen him away. "Miss Anderson, I will need you to hold him steady while I clean this," Dr. Whitmore said. "This will hurt considerably, Keaton. I would offer you whiskey, but I need you conscious and as still as possible." Keaton nodded, his jaw set in a hard line. Clara positioned herself near his uninjured shoulder, placing her hands firmly to brace him. When the doctor began irrigating the wound with carbolic solution, Keaton's entire body went rigid. A harsh sound escaped his throat, but he did not cry out. His right hand shot up and gripped Clara's forearm with surprising strength, his fingers wrapping around the fabric of her sleeve. "Look at me," Clara said quietly, leaning closer so her face was in his line of sight. "Not at what he is doing. Look right here." Those gray eyes locked onto hers, and she saw the pain swimming in them, the effort it took to remain still. She had seen many men break under less, but something in this cowboy's constitution ran deeper than mere stubbornness. There was a quality to his gaze, even through the agony, that spoke of integrity and fortitude. "Tell me your full name," she said, trying to distract him as Dr. Whitmore worked. "Keaton Mills," he ground out between clenched teeth. "Work for the Morrison Ranch. Been there 5 years. Where are you from originally?" "Texas. Came up this way after my folks passed." His grip on her arm tightened as the doctor probed deeper, looking for fresh starts and all that. "I understand something about fresh starts," Clara said softly. "I just arrived in McGill 3 weeks ago from Philadelphia." "Long way from home," Keaton managed, and despite everything, she thought she detected a hint of curiosity in his voice. "McGill is home now," she replied, "or it will be." Dr. Whitmore began stitching, and Clara felt Keaton's fingers dig into her arm with each pass of the needle through his torn flesh. She did not pull away or flinch, merely kept her eyes on his, offering what comfort she could through that simple connection. Sweat beaded on his forehead and ran down his temples, but he never looked away from her face. "You are doing very well," she told him. "The doctor is almost finished." "You done this before," Keaton observed, his voice strained but certain. "You are not squeamish like some women might be." "My father was a doctor," Clara explained. "I assisted him for years. Blood and wounds do not frighten me." "What does frighten you?" The question was unexpected, and she wondered if he was trying to distract himself now. Clara considered for a moment. "Helplessness. Not being able to do something when someone needs help." Keaton nodded slightly, understanding flickering in his eyes even through his pain. "Yeah, I know that feeling." Dr. Whitmore tied off the last stitch and stepped back, wiping his hands on a clean towel. "There. Miss Anderson, please bandage this while I prepare some laudanum for the pain." "Keaton, you were fortunate. A few inches to the right and that bullet would have struck something vital." "Lucky is my middle name," Keaton said with a ghost of a smile, though his face was ashen beneath his tan. Clara gently disengaged his hand from her arm and moved to gather the bandaging materials. As she wrapped the clean white cloth around his muscular arm, she was acutely aware of the warmth of his skin, the solid strength of him even in his weakened state. Her fingers worked with practiced competence, but she felt his gaze on her face the entire time. "You have gentle hands," he said quietly, "but steady too. That is a rare combination." "Thank you," Clara replied, concentrating on securing the bandage properly. "You must keep this clean and dry. Come back in 3 days so the doctor can check for infection." "Will you be here?" The question was direct, unadorned, and when she glanced up at his face, she saw something in his expression that made her heartbeat quicken. "I work here every day except Sunday," she said, maintaining her professional demeanor despite the flutter in her chest. "Then I will be here." Jim, the older cowboy who had been waiting near the door, stepped forward. "We should get you back to the ranch, Keaton. Boss will want to know you are patched up proper." Dr. Whitmore returned with a small brown bottle. "Take a spoonful of this every 4 hours for the pain. No heavy lifting for at least 2 weeks, and I mean that, young man. You tear those stitches and you will be right back here in worse shape." Keaton took the bottle and carefully sat up, his face going a shade paler with the movement. Clara instinctively reached out to steady him, her hand on his good shoulder. "Take it slow," she cautioned. "Yes, madam," he said, and this time there was definitely a smile in his voice if not quite on his lips. Jim helped him stand, and Keaton swayed slightly before finding his balance. He looked directly at Clara again. "Thank you, Miss Anderson, for the healing and the distraction both." "You are welcome, Mr. Mills. Please follow the doctor's orders." "I will try," he said, which was honest if not entirely reassuring. Then Jim was guiding him out the door and into the bright Nevada sunshine. Clara watched them go, noting how Keaton straightened his spine despite his injury, refusing to lean too heavily on his friend. Pride, she thought. The man had an abundance of pride, the kind that could be both a strength and a liability. "He is a good man," Dr. Whitmore observed, coming to stand beside her at the window. "Keaton Mills has a reputation in this town for honesty and hard work. Helped build the new schoolhouse last winter, volunteers at the church barn raisings. The Morrison Ranch is lucky to have him." "He seems quite determined," Clara said neutrally, though her mind was still replaying those intense moments when his eyes had locked onto hers, when his hand had gripped her arm like she was the only solid thing in a world of pain. "Determination is good, but it can make a man foolish," the doctor said. He should rest, but I would wager my medical bag that he will be back to work before those 2 weeks are up. Clara suspected the doctor was right. She turned away from the window and began cleaning up the bloodied instruments and soiled towels, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the injured cowboy with the gray eyes and the unflinching courage. The rest of the afternoon passed in the usual rhythm of the medical practice. Dr. Whitmore saw 2 more patients, a child with a nasty cough and an elderly woman with arthritis, and Clara assisted with both consultations. By the time they closed the office at 6 o'clock, she was ready to return to her small boarding room at Mrs. Henderson's house 3 streets over. McGill was not a large town, perhaps 500 souls if you counted the scattered ranches in the surrounding area. It had sprung up around the copper mining operations, and while it was not as wild as some frontier towns she had heard about, it still had that raw, unfinished quality that marked it as a place still becoming itself. The main street featured a general store, a saloon, the doctor's office, a small hotel, a bank, a livery stable, and the sheriff's office. The church at the north end and the small schoolhouse at the south end bracketed the community like bookends of civilization. Clara walked the dusty streets in the fading golden light, nodding to the few townspeople she had come to recognize in her short time there. Mrs. Henderson was a widow who supplemented her late husband's modest savings by taking in boarders, and she ran a respectable establishment with good meals and clean rooms. She was waiting on the front porch when Clara arrived, her round face creased with concern. "I heard about the shooting at the Morrison Ranch," she said immediately. "Was it Keaton Mills who was brought in?" News traveled fast in a small town. "Yes," Clara confirmed. "He will recover. The wound was clean." "Thank the Lord for that," Mrs. Henderson said fervently. "Keaton is a fine young man. Helps me with repairs around the house sometimes. Never asks for payment, though I always insist. He saved my cat from a coyote last spring, you know. Chased that beast off with just his voice and his presence." Clara smiled at the image. "He does seem quite capable." "Capable and kind, a rare pairing in a man," Mrs. Henderson said knowingly, her eyes twinkling. "And not hard to look at either if a woman was inclined to notice such things." "Mrs. Henderson," Clara protested, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "Oh, hush now, I may be old, but I am not blind. I saw how he looked at you at church last Sunday. He could barely keep his eyes off you during the whole sermon." "I did not notice," Clara lied, because she had absolutely noticed. Keaton had been sitting 3 pews back, and she had felt the weight of his gaze like a physical touch on the back of her neck. When she had glanced back once, he had nodded politely, a faint smile on his lips. Mrs. Henderson patted her arm. "Well, you will notice soon enough, I expect. That young man is smitten, mark my words. And after what happened today, with you helping patch him up, that will only deepen. There is something about a woman's care when a man is vulnerable that stays with him." Clara did not know what to say to that, so she excused herself to wash up before supper. In her small room with its simple furnishings, a bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a single chair by the window, she sat down and let herself think about Keaton Mills properly for the first time since he had left the doctor's office. He was handsome. There was no denying that. Strong features weathered by sun and wind, a firm jaw, those extraordinary eyes. But it was not his appearance that had caught her attention, not really. It was the way he had borne the pain without complaint, the way he had apologized for bleeding, the way he had asked her what frightened her as if her answer genuinely mattered to him. It was the respect in his voice when he spoke to her, the awareness that she was skilled and capable, not just an ornament or a nuisance. Clara had not come to Nevada looking for romance. She had come looking for purpose, for a place to rebuild her life after losing her father and, before that, her mother to cholera when she was 16. She had come to be useful, to use the skills her father had painstakingly taught her. But sitting in that room with the evening light slanting through the window, she could not deny that something had shifted inside her today when a wounded cowboy had looked at her like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to the world. 3 days later, Keaton Mills walked through the door of Dr. Whitmore's office precisely at 2 in the afternoon. He was clean-shaven, his dark hair still damp from washing, and he wore a fresh shirt with his left arm cradled carefully against his chest. His color was better, though Clara could see lines of pain around his eyes that suggested he was not quite as recovered as he was pretending to be. "Good afternoon, Mr. Mills," she greeted him professionally, though her heart had jumped at the sight of him. "The doctor is expecting you." "Afternoon, Miss Anderson," he said, his voice warm. "How have you been?" "I am well, thank you. How are you feeling? Have you been following the doctor's instructions?" A sheepish expression crossed his face. "Mostly." "Mostly," she repeated, her tone reproving. "Which means you have been working when you should have been resting." "Ranch does not run itself, madam, but I have been careful, I swear it. Nothing heavier than a feed bucket." Dr. Whitmore emerged before Clara could scold him further. "Keaton, good to see you upright. Let us take a look at that arm." They moved into the examination room, and Clara assisted as the doctor unwrapped the bandage. The wound looked clean, the stitches holding well, no signs of infection in the pink healing flesh. Clara felt a surge of relief, followed immediately by a flush of embarrassment at how much she cared about this man's well-being. "You have been taking care of this properly," Dr. Whitmore observed with approval. "Though I hear you have been back to light work already." "Just what needs doing, Doc," Keaton said. "Morrison has been good about keeping me from the heavy stuff." "See that he continues to be," the doctor said sternly. "Another week and those stitches should be ready to come out. The muscle will take longer to fully heal, but you are young and strong. You should make a complete recovery." "Thanks to you both," Keaton said, his eyes finding Clara's again. There was that same intensity, that same genuine regard that made her pulse quicken. As Dr. Whitmore rebandaged the arm with Clara's assistance, Keaton said, "Miss Anderson, I was wondering if you might be attending the town social this Saturday evening. They are holding it at the church hall to raise funds for the new school roof." Clara's hands paused for just a fraction of a second in their work. "I had not decided yet," she said carefully. "I am still quite new to McGill." "Which is exactly why you should come," Keaton persisted. "Best way to get to know folks, and there will be dancing if you enjoy that sort of thing." "I have not danced in a very long time," Clara admitted. "Well, if you come, I would be honored to remedy that," Keaton said. "Even with one good arm I can manage a decent waltz." Dr. Whitmore chuckled. "You will not be dancing on Saturday, young man, not if you want that arm to heal properly." "Then I will sit with Miss Anderson and keep her company," Keaton said without missing a beat. "Talking is just as good as dancing, maybe better." Clara felt warmth spreading through her chest, a combination of pleasure and nervousness. "I will consider it," she said, tying off the bandage. "I will take that as a maybe, which is better than a no," Keaton said with a grin that transformed his usually serious face into something boyish and charming. "Thank you, Doc, Miss Anderson. I will be back next week." After he left, Dr. Whitmore gave Clara a knowing look. "He is quite taken with you." "He is just being friendly," Clara protested weakly. "My dear, I have practiced medicine for 30 years and delivered half the children in this town. I know the difference between friendly and courting. That young man is courting you." The idea sent a thrill through Clara that she tried to suppress. "I am not looking for courtship. I came here to work, to be useful." "And you cannot do both." Dr. Whitmore raised an eyebrow. "You are young, Clara. Do not lock yourself away from life because of grief." "Your father would not have wanted that." Clara swallowed hard against the sudden lump in her throat. "I know, but I am not ready." "Then tell him so," the doctor said gently. "But be kind about it. Keaton Mills is a good man, and good men are worth their weight in gold out here." That evening, Clara sat at the small desk in her room and tried to write a letter to her cousin back in Philadelphia, but her mind kept wandering to Keaton's invitation. Part of her wanted to go to the social, to see him again in a setting that was not the clinical environment of the doctor's office. But another part of her, the part that was still raw with loss and uncertainty, wanted to maintain her distance, to focus solely on her work and not risk the complication of feelings. In the end, it was Mrs. Henderson who decided for her. "Of course you are going to the social," the older woman declared over breakfast on Saturday morning. "You cannot hide away forever, dear girl. And besides, I need you to help me carry the pies I am donating for the dessert table." So Clara found herself that evening wearing her best dress, a deep blue cotton with cream lace at the collar and cuffs that brought out the color of her eyes. Mrs. Henderson had insisted on helping her arrange her honey blonde hair in a more elaborate style than her usual simple bun, and when Clara looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the young woman staring back. She looked almost pretty, almost like someone who belonged at a social gathering instead of hunched over medical texts and instruments. The church hall was already crowded when they arrived, the large room decorated with bunting and lanterns that cast a warm glow over everything. A small band, fiddle, guitar, and accordion, was tuning up in one corner, and tables laden with food lined one wall. The air buzzed with conversation and laughter, with children running between adult legs and couples claiming spaces on the dance floor. Clara helped Mrs. Henderson set out the pies, then accepted a cup of lemonade and positioned herself near the wall, observing the gathering with a mixture of interest and shyness. She recognized some faces from church, and from the few times she had ventured into the general store, but she had not yet formed any real friendships in McGill beyond her working relationship with Dr. Whitmore and her landlady's motherly affection. "You made it." The deep voice came from directly behind her, and Clara turned to find Keaton Mills standing there, looking almost unfamiliar in clean trousers and a pressed white shirt. His left arm was still bound against his chest, but he stood tall and confident, his gray eyes bright with pleasure at seeing her. "Mrs. Henderson needed help with her pies," Clara said, then immediately felt foolish for not just admitting she had wanted to come. "I am glad she needed help then," Keaton said with a smile that suggested he saw right through her excuse. "You look beautiful, Miss Anderson." The compliment, delivered with such straightforward sincerity, made Clara's cheeks warm. "Thank you. You look quite well yourself. How is your arm?" "Healing fine, thanks to you and the doctor. Does not even hurt much anymore unless I move it wrong." He paused, then said, "Would you like to sit? There are some chairs on the porch where it is cooler and quieter." Clara nodded, and he led her through the crowd and out onto the wide porch that wrapped around the building. Several other couples and groups were scattered around, enjoying the relative peace and the evening breeze that had finally brought some relief from the day's heat. Keaton found 2 chairs slightly apart from the others and gestured for Clara to sit. "So," he said, settling into his own chair with a slight grimace that he tried to hide, "tell me about Philadelphia. What made you leave and come all the way out here?" Clara looked out at the darkening sky where the first stars were beginning to emerge. "My father died 6 months ago. He was everything to me after my mother passed when I was 16. We worked together, lived together, and when he was gone, the house felt like a tomb. I could not stay there surrounded by memories. I needed a fresh start, somewhere I could use what he taught me and maybe build a new life. I am sorry about your father, Keaton said quietly. Losing family, it leaves a hole that does not ever quite fill in, does it? No, Clara agreed. It does not. You said your parents passed, both within a year of each other. Pa had a heart condition and Ma just sort of faded after he was gone. I think she died of a broken heart, though the doctor said it was pneumonia. He was quiet for a moment. I understand about needing a fresh start. Texas had too many ghosts. They sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the music starting up inside, the sound of voices raised in laughter and conversation. Clara felt an unexpected sense of peace sitting there with this man she barely knew, sharing the understanding that only comes from similar loss. "Can I ask you something?" Keaton said finally. "Of course. Why did you become a doctor's assistant? Why not a teacher or a seamstress or any of the other things women usually do?" Clara smiled slightly. "Because I am good at it and it matters. My father used to say that healing was the most important work a person could do because it gave people a second chance at life. I wanted to be part of that. And honestly, teaching and sewing never interested me much. I like understanding how the body works, how to fix it when it breaks. There is something deeply satisfying about helping someone in pain." "You are remarkable," Keaton said, and the admiration in his voice was unmistakable. "Most people would not have the stomach for it, but you dive right in without flinching." "You did not flinch either," Clara pointed out. "When Dr. Whitmore was working on you, you barely made a sound." "I was trying to impress you," Keaton admitted with a self-deprecating laugh. "Did not want you thinking I was some weak-minded fool who could not handle a little pain." Clara turned to look at him fully. "I would never think that. Pain is pain. There is no shame in feeling it." "Maybe not, but there is pride in bearing it well," Keaton said. "My father used to say a man's character shows in how he handles suffering, whether he lets it break him or whether he stands firm." "And you stand firm," Clara said softly. "I try to." His eyes met hers in the lamplight spilling from the hall's windows, and something passed between them, an understanding, a connection that felt both thrilling and terrifying to Clara. Before she could analyze the feeling, a young woman burst onto the porch, her face flushed with excitement. "Keaton Mills, I thought that was you. We have barely seen you since you got shot. How are you healing?" Keaton stood politely, and Clara recognized the newcomer as Sarah Jean, one of the general store owner's daughters. "Healing just fine, thank you, Sarah Jean." "Well, you should come inside. Everyone is asking after you, and Lucy Morrison is telling the story of how you chased off those rustlers single-handedly. You are quite the hero." Sarah Jean's eyes flicked to Clara with barely concealed curiosity. "Oh, hello. You are the new assistant at Dr. Whitmore's, are you not?" "Yes, I am Clara Anderson," Clara said, standing as well. "Nice to meet you properly. I am Sarah Jean Wilson." The girl's smile was friendly enough, but Clara sensed assessment in her gaze, a weighing and measuring that made her slightly uncomfortable. "Pleasure to meet you," Clara replied. "Well, come on then, both of you. You cannot hide out here all evening." Sarah Jean linked her arm through Keaton's good one and began pulling him toward the door. He glanced back at Clara apologetically, and she followed them inside. The next hour passed in a whirl of introductions as Keaton, despite his injury, seemed to know everyone in the room and made a point of including Clara in every conversation. She met ranchers and shop owners, the school teacher and the sheriff, miners and their wives, young people and old. Everyone had a kind word about Keaton, and everyone was curious about the new doctor's assistant from Philadelphia. Clara found herself relaxing into the social atmosphere more than she had expected. The people of McGill were genuine in their welcome. and several of the women immediately drew her into discussions about the upcoming harvest festival and the quilting circle that met every Wednesday. By the time the band struck up a lively reel, Clara was actually enjoying herself. "I wish I could dance with you," Keaton said, appearing at her elbow with 2 cups of punch, "but the doc would have my hide." "Next time," Clara said without thinking, then caught herself. "I mean when your arm is healed." "I will hold you to that," Keaton said with satisfaction. "Miss Clara Anderson, I am officially claiming the first dance you have in McGill, Nevada." "That seems fair," Clara agreed, surprised at her own boldness, "considering I helped put you back together." They watched the dancing together, chatting easily about everything and nothing. Keaton told her about life on the Morrison Ranch, about the daily work of caring for cattle and horses, about the satisfaction of honest labor under the wide Nevada sky. Clara described her work with Dr. Whitmore, the various cases they had seen, her hopes of eventually learning even more advanced medical techniques. "You really love it," Keaton observed. "The healing work. Your whole face lights up when you talk about it." "I do," Clara confirmed. "It gives me purpose. After my father died, I felt so lost, but helping people, making a difference in their lives, that makes me feel connected to something larger than my own grief." "That is a good way to honor his memory," Keaton said thoughtfully. "Carrying on his work, helping others the way he helped you learn." Clara felt tears prick her eyes unexpectedly. "That is exactly what I am trying to do. Thank you for understanding." He reached out with his good hand and gently touched her arm, just a brief contact, but it sent warmth radiating through her. "I think we understand each other, you and me. We have both lost people we loved, both come to McGill looking for a new chapter. Maybe we are supposed to write that chapter together." The suggestion hung in the air between them, full of possibility and promise. Clara's practical mind told her it was too soon, that she barely knew this man, that she had not come here for romance. But her heart, that traitor, was already imagining what it might be like to have someone like Keaton Mills in her life. Someone strong and kind and honest who looked at her like she was the most fascinating person in the room. "Maybe," she said finally, the word coming out almost as a whisper. Keaton's smile in response was like the sun breaking through clouds. "I will take another maybe. I seem to be collecting them from you." As the evening wound down and Mrs. Henderson appeared ready to leave, Keaton walked them both back to the boarding house despite Clara's protests that it was not necessary. "A gentleman always sees ladies home safely," he said firmly. "Even with one arm I can handle any trouble that might arise, which it will not because McGill is a peaceful town, but still. Principle of the thing." Mrs. Henderson chattered happily about the social, about who had danced with whom and which pies had sold for the highest prices, while Clara and Keaton walked slightly behind her in comfortable silence. When they reached the boarding house porch, Mrs. Henderson tactfully excused herself to go inside, leaving them alone in the starlit darkness. "Thank you for coming tonight," Keaton said, "and for talking with me. I have been wanting to get to know you better since that first day in the doctor's office." "I enjoyed it," Clara admitted. "More than I expected to, honestly. You are easy to talk to." "So are you," Keaton replied. "And you listen, really listen, which is rarer than you might think. Most people just wait for their turn to talk." Clara laughed softly. "My father always said a good doctor needs to be a good listener. People tell you what is wrong if you give them space to speak." "Smart man, your father." Keaton hesitated, then said, "Clara, I know you are still grieving and settling in here, and I do not want to rush you or make you uncomfortable. But I would really like to call on you properly, if you would allow it. Maybe go for a walk next Sunday after church, or have lunch at the hotel dining room." Clara's heart hammered in her chest. This was courtship, real and intentional, and accepting meant opening herself to the possibility of caring for someone again, of risking loss again. But as she looked at Keaton's earnest face in the lamplight, at the hope and vulnerability in his expression, she found she could not say no. "I would like that," she said softly, his whole face brightened. "Really, that is wonderful. I will call for you after church then. I will look forward to it." They stood there for another moment, neither quite ready to say goodbye. Finally, Keaton tipped his hat. "Good night, Clara. Sleep well." "Good night, Keaton. Take care of that arm," he grinned. "Yes, madam." Clara watched him walk away into the darkness before going inside, where she found Mrs. Henderson lurking near the parlor door with a knowing smile. "That young man is head over heels for you," the older woman declared. "We are just getting to know each other," Clara protested, but she could not keep the smile off her own face. "Hum. Just you wait. Keaton Mills is the marrying kind, and he has clearly set his sights on you. This time next year I would not be surprised if you were Mrs. Mills. Mrs. Henderson." But Clara could not deny the little thrill the idea sent through her. The following week passed in a pleasant rhythm of work and anticipation. Clara assisted Dr. Whitmore with various patients, including a difficult childbirth that required all her concentration and skill. When mother and baby both came through healthy, the sense of accomplishment was immense. The doctor praised her calm efficiency and told her that her father would have been proud. Keaton came in to have his stitches removed, and Clara performed the task under Dr. Whitmore's supervision. Her hands were steady as she snipped and gently pulled the threads free, aware of Keaton watching her face the entire time. "You have magic in your fingers," he said when she finished. "Barely felt a thing." "That is the goal," Clara replied, applying a light bandage over the healing wound. "The scar will fade over time. You may have some stiffness in the muscle for a few months, but with gentle exercise, you should regain full strength and range of motion." "Will you show me the exercises?" Keaton asked, and Clara caught the hint of mischief in his voice. He was looking for excuses to spend time with her. "I can write them down for you," she said primly, but she was smiling. "Or you could demonstrate them. I am a hands-on learner." Dr. Whitmore cleared his throat pointedly from across the room, and both Clara and Keaton had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I will write them down very clearly," Clara said firmly, but her eyes were dancing with amusement. Sunday arrived with clear blue skies and temperatures that were warm but not oppressive. Clara dressed carefully in her second-best dress, a soft green that Mrs. Henderson insisted brought out her eyes, and pinned her hair up with extra care. Her stomach fluttered with nervous excitement as she walked to church with Mrs. Henderson. Keaton was waiting outside the church building, dressed in his Sunday best, his dark hair slicked back and his face freshly shaved. His arm was free of the sling now, though he still moved it carefully. When he saw Clara, his face lit up with a smile that made her heart skip. "Good morning, Miss Anderson, Mrs. Henderson," he greeted them. "Good morning, Keaton," Clara replied, suddenly feeling shy. They sat together during the service, sharing a hymnal, and Clara was acutely aware of Keaton's presence beside her, the warmth of his shoulder nearly touching hers, the deep rumble of his voice when he sang. When the sermon, something about faith and perseverance, ended and people began filtering out into the sunshine, Keaton offered Clara his arm. "Shall we take that walk?" he asked. Clara nodded, and they set off down the main street at an easy pace. McGill looked almost peaceful on Sunday morning, with most businesses closed and families gathered for the day of rest. They walked past the town limits and onto a path that led toward a small creek that ran through the valley. "I come out here sometimes when I need to think," Keaton said as they walked. "It is peaceful, away from the noise of the ranch and the town." The creek was shallow and clear, burbling over smooth stones. Cottonwood trees provided shade along its banks, and wildflowers added splashes of color to the grasses. Keaton led Clara to a flat rock near the water's edge, and they sat down side by side. "This is beautiful," Clara said, breathing in the fresh air and the scent of water and growing things. "I thought you might like it," Keaton said with satisfaction. "Philadelphia must have been very different from this." "Completely different," Clara agreed. "Crowded streets, noise, smoke from factories. Beautiful in its own way, but nothing like this open space. I am still getting used to seeing so much sky." "Does it scare you, the bigness of it all?" Clara considered. "Sometimes, but mostly it feels freeing, like there is room to breathe, room to become whoever I want to be." "And who do you want to be?" Keaton asked, his eyes on her face. "I want to be good at what I do," Clara said slowly, thinking out loud. "I want to help people make a real difference. I want to honor my father's memory by being excellent at the work he taught me. Beyond that," she shrugged, "I suppose I am still figuring it out." "That is honest," Keaton said. "I respect that. Too many people pretend they have everything figured out when they are just as lost as the rest of us." "What about you?" Clara asked. "What do you want?" Keaton was quiet for a long moment, staring at the water. "I want a place that is mine. Not just a bunk in a ranch house, but a real home. I want to build something lasting, maybe have my own spread someday. I want a family, kids running around, a wife who is my partner in making a life." He glanced at Clara, his expression vulnerable. "I want to matter to someone and have them matter to me. I am tired of being alone." The raw honesty of his words touched Clara deeply. "You are not alone," she said softly. "You have friends here, people who care about you. Jim, the Morrisons, everyone at the church social knew your name." "That is not the same as having someone who is yours," Keaton said. "Someone who sees all of you, the good and bad, and chooses to stay anyway." Clara understood exactly what he meant, the loneliness that could exist even in a crowd. Since her father's death, she had been surrounded by people but felt fundamentally alone, unmoored from the one person who truly knew her. "I understand," she said simply. Keaton turned to face her more fully. "Clara, I know we have only known each other a short time, but I feel like I have been waiting for you without even knowing it. When you walked into that doctor's office 3 weeks ago, something just clicked into place inside me. I know that probably sounds foolish." "It does not sound foolish," Clara whispered, her heart pounding. "I feel it too, that connection. It frightens me because it is so fast, so unexpected." "Are you frightened enough to push me away?" Keaton asked, his gray eyes searching hers. Clara took a deep breath. "No. I think I am more frightened of pushing you away and wondering what might have been." Relief and joy washed over Keaton's face. "Then we will take it slow as you need. I am not going anywhere, Clara. I am right here, for as long as you will have me." Acting on impulse, Clara reached out and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong and steady. They sat that way for a long time, hands clasped, watching the water flow past, not needing words to communicate what was growing between them. Over the following weeks, Clara and Keaton fell into a pattern of seeing each other regularly. He would stop by the doctor's office on various pretexts, always finding some small reason to need medical advice, though both of them knew he was really there to see Clara. She would roll her eyes at his transparent excuses, but could never quite hide her smile. On Sunday afternoons, they would walk together, exploring different paths around McGill, talking about everything under the sun. Keaton told her about his childhood in Texas, about learning to ride and rope from his father, about his mother's garden and her apple pies. Clara shared memories of her parents, of her father teaching her anatomy from medical texts, of her mother's gentle wisdom before illness took her. They attended church socials and town gatherings together, and gradually people began to think of them as a pair. Clara noticed the approving looks from married couples, the way conversations would pause when they walked by together, the knowing smiles. Mrs. Henderson was beside herself with delight, telling Clara daily that she had known from the start that Keaton was the one. But it was not all smooth sailing. About 6 weeks into their courtship, trouble arrived in McGill in the form of Keaton's past. Clara was organizing supplies in the doctor's office when the door burst open and a woman swept in, all dark curls and flashing eyes, wearing a traveling suit that was far too fancy for dusty McGill. She was beautiful in a dramatic way, with high cheekbones and a full mouth painted deep red. "Where is he?" she demanded without preamble. "Where is Keaton Mills?" Clara blinked at the stranger's rudeness. "I am sorry, who are you?" "I am Deanna, his fiancée, or I was, before he ran off to this God-forsaken place without so much as a goodbye. Now where is he?" The word fiancé hit Clara like a physical blow. "Keaton is engaged," "was engaged," Deanna corrected impatiently. "Back in Texas. But we had a fight and he left, and I am here to bring him back where he belongs." Dr. Whitmore emerged from the back room, drawn by the commotion. "Can I help you, miss?" Deanna turned her imperious gaze on him. "I need to find Keaton Mills. Someone in town said he comes here often." "He does, but I am not in the habit of giving out information about patients," the doctor said coolly. "I am not some stranger," Deanna snapped. "I am his intended, and I have traveled all the way from Texas to find him." Clara felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. Keaton had never mentioned a fiancé, had never said anything about leaving someone behind in Texas. Had he been lying to her this whole time? Was she just a distraction, a way to pass the time in his new town, the Morrison Ranch? She heard herself say, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. "He works at the Morrison Ranch about 5 miles north of town." Deanna smiled triumphantly. "Thank you. Finally, someone with sense." She swept out as dramatically as she had entered, leaving silence in her wake. Dr. Whitmore looked at Clara with concern. "Are you all right, my dear?" "I need some air," Clara managed, and walked out the back door into the small yard behind the office. She stood there in the hot Nevada sun, trying to process what had just happened, trying to reconcile the Keaton she knew with a man who would be engaged to one woman while courting another. It did not make sense. Nothing about it fit with the honest, straightforward man she had come to care for so deeply. But Deanna had seemed so certain, so confident in her claim. And Clara was new here, while Deanna presumably had history with Keaton, years of shared past. The afternoon dragged by in misery. Clara went through the motions of her work, but her mind was elsewhere, replaying every conversation with Keaton, looking for signs she might have missed, clues that he was not who he seemed. It was nearly closing time when Keaton burst through the door, his face flushed and his eyes wild. "Clara, I need to talk to you. Deanna found me at the ranch, and I know she came here first. Whatever she told you, please let me explain." "So there is something to explain," Clara said, her voice flat. "She said she was your fiancé." "Was," Keaton emphasized desperately. "Years ago, Clara. We were engaged for about 6 months when I was 20 years old, and it was a disaster. We fought constantly, wanted completely different things. I ended it before I left Texas, made it absolutely clear we were finished. I have not had any contact with her in 5 years." "She does not seem to think it is finished," Clara pointed out. "Deanna has never been good at accepting things she does not like," Keaton said, moving closer. "But Clara, you have to believe me. There is nothing between us anymore. There has not been for years. She is here on some fantasy that we can rekindle something that was never really there in the first place." Clara wanted desperately to believe him, but doubt gnawed at her. "Why did you never mention her? In all our talks about our pasts, You never said you had been engaged." Keaton ran his hand through his hair in frustration. "Because it was not important. It was years ago, and it ended badly, and I wanted to leave it in the past where it belonged. I did not think she would ever come here, did not think she even cared enough to try to find me." "Yet here she is," Clara said. "Yes, here she is, and I have already told her in no uncertain terms that I am courting you, that I have no interest in rekindling anything with her, and that she needs to go back to Texas." Keaton reached out and gently took Clara's hands in his. "Clara, please. You have to know what you mean to me. These past weeks with you have been the happiest of my life. I am falling in love with you, and nothing Deanna says or does can change that." Clara's breath caught. "You are falling in love with me." "Yes," Keaton said simply. "I know it is fast, and maybe I should not have said it yet, but it is true. I look at you and I see my future, Clara. I see the home I want to build, the life I want to live. You are everything I have been looking for." Tears welled in Clara's eyes. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "That is why hearing about Deanna hurt so much. I thought maybe I had been wrong about you, wrong about us." "You were not wrong," Keaton said fervently. "I am exactly who you think I am. I would never lie to you or play games with your heart." "You are too important to me," Clara believed him. Looking into his eyes, seeing the sincerity there, she believed him completely. "What are you going to do about Deanna?" "I am going to make her understand that there is no chance of reconciliation, and I am going to help her get on the next stage out of McGill," Keaton said firmly. "She is staying at the hotel. I will talk to her tonight and make everything clear." "Should I come with you?" Clara asked uncertainly. "No," Keaton said. "This is my past to deal with, but thank you for offering. Just know that tomorrow, when Deanna is gone, I will still be here, and I will still be falling in love with you." He leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to Clara's forehead, a promise and a reassurance, before leaving to confront his past. The next morning, Clara learned from Mrs. Henderson, who had heard from the hotel owner's wife, that Deanna had left on the early stage after a loud argument with Keaton in the hotel lobby the previous evening. Apparently, she had made quite a scene, throwing accusations and insults, but Keaton had remained calm and resolute, reiterating that their engagement had ended years ago and nothing would change his mind. When Keaton came to the doctor's office that afternoon, he looked tired but relieved. "She is gone," he told Clara, "and she finally understood that I meant what I said. She accused me of being a fool for throwing away what we had, but the truth is we never had anything real, not like what you and I are building." Clara took his hands. "I am sorry you had to deal with that. It could not have been easy." "It was not," Keaton admitted, "but it was necessary. I needed her to understand, and I needed you to know that you are my future, not my past." Their relationship deepened after that, the crisis somehow strengthening rather than weakening their bond. Clara appreciated how Keaton had handled the situation with honesty and integrity, and he seemed to cherish her even more knowing that she had trusted him despite her doubts. As summer faded into fall, they became an established part of each other's lives. Keaton taught Clara to ride horses, taking her out on gentle trails around the Morrison Ranch on Sunday afternoons. She was not a natural rider at first, bouncing awkwardly in the saddle and gripping the reins too tightly, but Keaton was patient and encouraging. "You are thinking too much," he told her one afternoon as they walked the horses slowly through golden autumn grasses. "Feel the horse's rhythm, move with it instead of against it." Clara tried to relax into the motion, and suddenly it clicked. She felt the horse's gait, the rolling movement, and adjusted her body to match. "Oh, I understand now." "There you go," Keaton said with pride. "You are a natural." "Hardly," Clara laughed, "but I am improving." "You could be good at anything you set your mind to," Keaton said seriously. That is one of the things I love about you. You are not afraid to try new things, even when they are difficult. They had started saying love more freely now, the word becoming comfortable between them. Clara loved how Keaton looked at her like she hung the moon. She loved his steady presence, his humor, his kindness to everyone around him. She loved how he respected her work and never suggested she should give it up, even though she knew some men would expect a wife to stay home. The question of marriage hung unspoken between them as fall progressed into early winter. They had been courting for 4 months, which was a perfectly respectable amount of time by McGill's standards, but neither of them had raised the subject directly. Clara sensed Keaton was waiting for some sign from her that she was ready, and she was trying to work up the courage to have the conversation. The opportunity came in November, during the first significant snowfall of the season. Clara and Dr. Whitmore had been called out to a remote ranch to assist with a difficult case of influenza. By the time they finished and started back to town, snow was falling heavily, and the temperature had dropped precipitously. "We should have started back sooner," Dr. Whitmore said, worry creasing his face as he guided the horse and wagon through the thickening snow. "I do not like the look of this weather." Neither did Clara. The snow was coming down so thick now that she could barely see more than a few feet ahead. The wind had picked up, howling around them and cutting through her wool coat like it was made of paper. Her fingers and toes were going numb despite her gloves and boots. "How much farther to town?" she asked, trying to keep her teeth from chattering. "At least another hour at this pace," the doctor replied grimly, but they did not make it another hour. The horse stumbled in a snow-covered rut, and the wagon lurched violently. Clara was thrown from the seat, landing hard in a snowbank. She heard Dr. Whitmore cry out, and when she struggled to her feet, she saw him clutching his leg, his face twisted in pain. "What happened?" Clara called over the wind, scrambling back to the wagon. "My leg, I think it is broken," the doctor gasped. "Clara, you need to stabilize it, then go for help." Clara's medical training kicked in despite her fear. She carefully examined the leg, confirming that it was indeed broken below the knee, the bone fractured but not protruding through the skin. She used supplies from the medical bag to create a makeshift splint, working as quickly as her cold, numbed fingers would allow. "I cannot leave you here," she said when she finished. "You will freeze." "You have to," Dr. Whitmore insisted. "I will bundle up in the wagon with all the blankets." "You are younger and faster. You need to go find help before we both freeze to death." Clara knew he was right, but the thought of leaving him alone in this blizzard made her sick with worry. Still, staying here would not help either of them. She got the doctor as comfortable as possible in the wagon bed, piling every blanket and coat they had over him, then set off on foot in the direction she hoped was toward McGill. The snow was already several inches deep and getting deeper by the minute. The wind drove icy particles into her face, making it hard to see or breathe. Clara focused on putting one foot in front of the other, trying to follow what she thought was the road, but within minutes she was disoriented and lost. She had no idea how long she walked. Time seemed to lose meaning in the white void. Her legs were like lead, her lungs burning with each frozen breath. She knew the signs of hypothermia from her medical training, knew she was starting to experience them herself. The drowsiness creeping over her, the confusion, the desire to just lie down in the soft snow and rest. "No," she said aloud, her voice whipped away by the wind. "Keep moving, do not stop." But her body was not listening anymore. She stumbled and fell to her knees in the snow, and this time she could not seem to find the strength to stand again. The cold was less sharp now, replaced by a strange warmth and heaviness. She thought of Keaton, of his gray eyes and gentle smile, of all the things they had not yet said to each other. She wished she could see him one more time, tell him how much he meant to her. Clara. Was someone calling her name, or was she imagining it? The voice seemed to come from very far away. Strong hands gripped her shoulders, lifted her. Clara, stay with me. Open your eyes. She forced her eyes open and saw Keaton's face above her, his features tight with fear and determination. Keaton, I have got you, he said, gathering her into his arms and starting to walk. Morrison sent me to find you when the storm got bad. I have been searching for an hour. Just hold on. Clara tried to speak, to tell him about Dr. Whitmore, but her mouth would not form the words. She was so tired, so cold. She let herself rest against Keaton's chest, feeling the solid strength of him, the warmth seeping from his body into hers. She drifted in and out of consciousness as Keaton carried her. At some point they were on a horse, Keaton holding her in front of him, wrapped in his coat. Then there were buildings, lights, voices. Mrs. Henderson's face appeared, then disappeared. Someone was removing her wet clothes, piling warm blankets over her. A fire blazed nearby, blessed heat radiating from it. Dr. Whitmore, Clara managed to mumble. Broken leg on the road. We found him, Keaton's voice said from somewhere nearby. Another search party got to him. He is being treated. He will be all right. Relief washed through Clara, and she finally let herself sink into the darkness. She woke in her own bed at Mrs. Henderson's, late afternoon sun slanting through the window. Her body ached all over, and her fingers and toes felt like they were on fire as circulation returned to them. But she was alive and warm. Mrs. Henderson appeared in the doorway almost immediately, as if she had been watching for signs of movement. Oh, thank heavens! You gave us such a fright, dear girl. How long? Clara's voice was rough. You have been sleeping for nearly 24 hours. Keaton carried you back yesterday afternoon, half frozen, if he had not found you when he did. Mrs. Henderson's voice broke. Well, I do not like to think about it. Where is he? Clara asked. Downstairs. He has barely left the house. Slept in the parlor chair last night, refusing to go home until he knew you were all right. Can you send him up? Clara requested. I need to see him. Mrs. Henderson nodded and bustled away. A few minutes later, Keaton appeared in the doorway, and the sight of him made Clara's throat tight with emotion. He looked exhausted, his face haggard, his clothes rumpled like he had slept in them, which he apparently had. Clara, he said, crossing the room in 3 strides and kneeling beside her bed. How do you feel? Sore and tired, but alive thanks to you, Clara said, reaching out to touch his face. Keaton, you saved my life. I could not lose you, he said fiercely, capturing her hand and pressing it against his cheek. When Morrison told me you and the doctor had not made it back before the storm hit, I nearly went mad with fear. I have never been so terrified in my life as I was searching for you in that blizzard. I was thinking of you, Clara confessed. When I fell and could not get up, I was thinking about you, about how I wished I could tell you how much I love you. You do not have to wish, Keaton said softly. I am right here and I love you too. More than I thought it was possible to love another person. Then marry me, Clara said, the words tumbling out before she could second-guess them. Life is too short and uncertain to wait. I want to be your wife, Keaton. I want to build that life with you that we have been talking about. Keaton stared at her for a moment, then laughed, a joyous, incredulous sound. I am supposed to be the one asking you. I have been planning it for weeks, trying to find the perfect moment. Well, I am asking you instead, Clara said with a smile. So what is your answer? Yes, Keaton said without hesitation. Yes, 1,000 times yes. I will marry you, Clara Anderson, and spend the rest of my life loving you and thanking God I found you. He leaned forward and kissed her then, gentle and reverent, a kiss that tasted of relief and joy and promise. When they broke apart, both of them were smiling through tears. "I suppose I should ask your permission properly," Keaton said. "Do you have any family I need to write to?" "My only living relative is a cousin in Philadelphia who I exchange letters with twice a year," Clara said. "I am quite on my own in the world, which means I can make my own decisions." "Lucky for me," Keaton said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I was carrying this when I went looking for you. I wanted to be ready in case the right moment presented itself." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small but lovely sapphire. "It was my grandmother's ring. My mother gave it to me before she died, told me to give it to the woman I wanted to spend my life with." "It is beautiful," Clara breathed as Keaton slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. "So are you," Keaton said. "Inside and out. You are the most beautiful, brave, capable woman I have ever known, and I am the luckiest man alive that you said yes." They were married 6 weeks later, on Christmas Eve, in the same church where they had sat together that first Sunday. Clara wore a simple ivory dress that Mrs. Henderson had helped her sew, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Keaton wore his best suit, and when Clara walked down the aisle toward him, the look on his face made her feel like the most precious thing in the world. Dr. Whitmore, still recovering from his broken leg, but insisting on attending despite his crutches, stood up with Keaton as his best man. Sarah Jean Wilson stood up with Clara, honored to be asked despite not knowing the bride very well. The church was full of townspeople who had come to feel affection for the young couple, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the congregation broke into spontaneous applause. The kiss Keaton gave her at the altar was chaste but full of promise, his lips warm against hers, his hand gentle on her cheek. "My wife," he whispered against her mouth. "My Clara." "My husband," she whispered back, joy bubbling up inside her. The reception was held in the church hall, with food and music and dancing. Keaton's arm had healed completely by then, and he claimed the first dance with his bride, sweeping her around the floor with surprising grace for a cowboy. "Remember when I said, I was claiming your first dance in McGill?" he said as they waltzed. "I remember," Clara replied, gazing up at him. "I am claiming every dance from now on," Keaton said. "Every dance, every moment, every day. You are mine now, Clara Mills, and I am yours." "I like the sound of that," Clara said. "Clara Mills, it feels right." They honeymooned at the Morrison Ranch, where the owner had generously offered them the use of a small cabin on the property for a week. It was cozy and private, with a fireplace and a comfortable bed, and for 7 days they lived in their own little world, learning each other in all the ways that mattered. Keaton was a tender lover, patient and attentive, making Clara's first experience of physical intimacy something beautiful rather than frightening. He worshipped her body with his hands and mouth, telling her over and over how much he loved her, how grateful he was that she was his. And Clara discovered a passion in herself she had not known existed, a desire that matched his own, a hunger to be close to him in every possible way. They talked for hours, lying tangled together under quilts, sharing dreams and fears and plans for the future. Keaton told her he had been saving money for years, that he had nearly enough to buy a small piece of land and start building their own ranch. Clara told him she wanted to continue working with Dr. Whitmore, at least part-time, that healing work was part of who she was. "I would never ask you to give that up," Keaton assured her. "Your skills and your passion for helping people, those are part of what I love about you. We will figure out how to balance everything, the ranch work and your medical work, and eventually, if God wills, children." "You want children?" Clara asked, though she already knew the answer. "At least 3 or 4, Keaton said with a grin. A whole houseful if you are willing." "I am willing," Clara said softly, imagining a future filled with children who had Keaton's gray eyes and his kind heart. They returned to McGill after their week at the cabin, moving into a small house that Keaton had rented near the edge of town. It was modest but comfortable, with 2 bedrooms, a parlor, and a good-sized kitchen. Clara threw herself into making it a home, sewing curtains and arranging furniture, while Keaton worked at the Morrison Ranch during the day and spent evenings helping to fix up their little house. Clara continued working with Dr. Whitmore 3 days a week, and the arrangement worked well. She was there for the more serious cases that required extra hands, and she covered the office when the doctor needed to make house calls. The rest of her time, she spent taking care of their home and supporting Keaton in his work. Their first year of marriage passed in a blur of contentment and hard work. By spring, Keaton had saved enough to purchase 40 acres of good grazing land about 2 miles from town. They broke ground on a small ranch house in April, and every spare moment was spent working on it. Friends from town came to help with barn raisings and house construction, and by July, they had a snug 2-story house with a barn and corral. Clara discovered she was pregnant in August, just over a year after their wedding. She had been feeling tired and queasy for a couple of weeks, and when her courses were late, she knew. The joy on Keaton's face when she told him was something she would treasure forever. "A baby," he kept repeating, his hand splayed across her still flat stomach. "Our baby. Clara, you have made me the happiest man in the world." "We made this baby together," Clara reminded him with a smile. "You had something to do with it, too." The pregnancy was relatively easy, though Clara continued working with Dr. Whitmore until her 6th month, when the physical demands became too much. Keaton was ridiculously protective, worrying over every little thing, but Clara found his concern endearing rather than annoying. Their son was born in March of 1884, after a labor that lasted most of a day and left Clara exhausted but exhilarated. Dr. Whitmore assisted with the birth, with Keaton pacing anxiously in the parlor until the baby's first cry rang out. Then he was at Clara's side, tears streaming down his face as he looked at the tiny, squalling infant in her arms. "A boy," Clara said wonderingly. "We have a son, Keaton." "What should we name him?" Keaton asked, gently touching the baby's soft, dark hair. "I was thinking Michael," Clara said. "After my father." "Michael Joseph Mills." "Perfect," Keaton agreed, kissing her forehead. "He is perfect, and you are perfect, and I love you both more than life itself." Little Michael was a good baby, healthy and strong. He had his father's dark hair, and as the months passed, it became clear he would have his mother's blue eyes. Clara took to motherhood with the same competence she brought to everything else, though she sometimes felt overwhelmed by the responsibility of keeping this tiny human alive and thriving. Keaton was a devoted father, coming in from ranch work to hold his son, singing to him in a surprisingly good voice, walking the floor with him when he was fussy. Watching her husband with their child, Clara fell in love with him all over again, seeing new depths to his character, new tenderness in his strong hands. When Michael was 6 months old, Clara began working with Dr. Whitmore again, just 1 day a week at first. Mrs. Henderson was delighted to watch the baby, spoiling him outrageously whenever she got the chance. Clara found she needed that connection to her healing work, that it kept her grounded in her own identity, even as she embraced her roles as wife and mother. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and milestones. Their ranch grew as Keaton bought more cattle and expanded their grazing land. Clara became known throughout the area for her medical skills, and people would come to their ranch at all hours seeking help, which she gave freely. Their second child, a daughter they named Catherine Rose, was born in 1886, followed by another son, Thomas James, in 1888. Their house rang with the sounds of children playing, with Keaton's laughter and Clara's gentle corrections. Meals around their table were lively affairs, with 3 growing children and often a ranch hand or two that Keaton had hired. Clara sometimes looked around at her full, noisy home and marveled at how different her life had turned out from what she had imagined that day. She stepped off the stage in McGill, scared and grieving and uncertain. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Keaton took Clara back to the creek where they had sat and talked during their courtship. It was summer, the cottonwoods full and green, the water sparkling in the sunlight. They sat on the same flat rock, holding hands, watching the water flow. "Do you remember what we talked about that first time here?" Keaton asked. "You said you wanted a place that was yours, a family, someone who mattered to you," Clara recalled. "And I said I wanted to be good at what I did to honor my father's memory. We got it all, did we not?" Keaton said with satisfaction, "Everything we wanted and more." "More than I ever dreamed possible," Clara agreed. "Sometimes I still cannot believe how lucky I was that you got shot that day," Keaton laughed. "Only you would consider my getting shot a lucky event." "It brought you to me," Clara said simply. "If you had not come into Dr. Whitmore's office that afternoon, we might never have met, or we might have met differently in a way that did not lead to this." "I do not believe that," Keaton said, turning to face her fully. "I think we were always meant to find each other, maybe not exactly the way it happened, but somehow, some way. You were made for me, Clara, and I was made for you. The universe was just helping us along." Clara smiled at his romantic notion, but she could not entirely disagree. Their connection had been immediate and powerful, a recognition that went beyond logic or reason. "You healed more than just my wounds," she said softly, echoing words she had never quite articulated before. "When I met you, I was still so broken inside from losing my father, so lost and lonely. You gave me a reason to open my heart again, to trust in the possibility of happiness. You healed my soul, Keaton Mills." Keaton's eyes were suspiciously bright. "And you healed mine, Clara Mills. You took a lonely cowboy who thought he would always be alone and gave him a home, a family, a purpose beyond just surviving. You showed me what love really looks like, what it means to be part of something bigger than myself." They kissed there by the creek, a kiss that held 10 years of shared history, 3 children, countless joys and a few sorrows, and the promise of whatever years remained to them. When they broke apart, both were smiling. "Should we head back?" Clara asked. "Mrs. Henderson said she would watch the children until supper, but I do not want to take advantage." "In a minute," Keaton said. "I just want to sit here with you a little longer, remember how it all started." So they sat in companionable silence, hands clasped, watching the eternal flow of water over stones, grateful for the life they had built together and the love that had made it all possible. The years continued to unfold with their own rhythms and challenges. Michael grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved books and learning. Catherine was spirited and adventurous, always climbing trees and racing her brothers. Thomas was the baby for 5 years until surprise twins, Emma and Elijah, arrived in 1893, completing their family at 5 children. The ranch prospered under Keaton's careful management, becoming one of the most successful operations in the area. He hired good men who became like family, and the Mills Ranch was known as a fair place to work. Clara continued her medical work, becoming so skilled that Dr. Whitmore began talking about her taking over his practice when he finally retired. In 1895, Dr. Whitmore did retire, moving back east to live with his daughter. Clara found herself running the medical practice, with Keaton's full support. She hired a young doctor fresh from medical school, David Preston, to handle the more advanced procedures she was not formally trained for, but she remained the heart and soul of medical care in McGill. The townspeople trusted her completely, having seen her steady competence and genuine care for more than a decade. She delivered babies, set bones, nursed the sick, and comforted the dying. And through it all, Keaton was her rock, supporting her work even when it meant late nights and missed family dinners, understanding that healing was as much a part of her identity as being a wife and mother. Their children grew and thrived. Michael went east to college, then came back to McGill to become a teacher at the expanded school. Catherine married a young rancher from a neighboring spread, giving Clara and Keaton their first grandchild in 1905. Thomas took over more of the ranch operations as Keaton's hair began to gray, and his body showed the effects of years of hard work. The twins, Emma and Elijah, were still at home in 1910, when Clara and Keaton celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary. The whole family gathered at the ranch for a huge celebration, with children and grandchildren running everywhere, friends from town bringing food and good wishes, music and laughter filling the air. Clara stood on the porch of their house, watching the festivities, when Keaton came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. At 53, he was still strong and vital, though his dark hair was now more silver than brown. Clara, at 48, had a few threads of gray in her blonde hair and laugh lines around her eyes, but Keaton still looked at her like she was the most beautiful woman in the world. "Happy anniversary, my love," he murmured against her ear. "Happy anniversary," Clara replied, leaning back against his solid warmth. 25 years. Can you believe it? Some days it feels like forever, and some days it feels like just yesterday that I walked into Dr. Whitmore's office with a bullet hole in my arm, Keaton said. "Best bullet hole of my life," Clara joked, and Keaton laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest into her back. "You know what I have been thinking about," Keaton said. "That day you asked me to marry you while you were recovering from nearly freezing to death." "I did not want to waste any more time," Clara remembered. "Life felt too precious and uncertain to wait." "You were right," Keaton said. "And I am grateful every day that you did not wait, that you grabbed hold of what we had and refused to let it go." "You are the bravest person I know, Clara Mills." "I learned from the best," Clara said, turning in his arms to face him. "You rode out into a blizzard to find me, carried me miles through snow and wind. You have faced down rustlers and droughts and everything the West could throw at us, and you never once complained or gave up." "We are quite the pair," Keaton said with a grin. "Yes, we are," Clara agreed, reaching up to cup his weathered face in her hands. "And I would not change a single moment of our life together, even the hard parts, because they made us stronger." "I love you, Clara," Keaton said seriously. "More today than the day I married you, which I would not have thought possible. You are my heart, my home, my everything." "And you are mine," Clara whispered. "Always and forever, you are mine." They kissed there on the porch, surrounded by the sounds of their family celebrating below, and Clara felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. She had come to McGill broken and alone, seeking only purpose and a way to honor her father's memory. But she had found so much more: love, family, community, a life richer and fuller than any she could have imagined. Keaton had been shot by rustlers, had stumbled into Dr. Whitmore's office bleeding and in pain, and somehow that violence had led to this, to 25 years of marriage and 5 children, and a love that had only grown deeper with time. Clara had healed his physical wound that day, stitching his torn flesh with careful hands. But in the years since, they had healed each other in ways far more profound, mending broken hearts and lonely souls, creating something beautiful and lasting from the raw materials of grief and hope. As the sun began to set over the Nevada landscape, they both loved, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Clara and Keaton stood together on their porch, watching their family and friends celebrate below. 5 children played with cousins and neighbors. Grandchildren toddled on unsteady legs. Friends laughed and shared stories. "You healed more than just my wounds," Keaton said softly, repeating Clara's words from years earlier. "You healed my whole life, made me whole in ways I did not even know I was broken." "We healed each other," Clara corrected gently. "That is what love does, I think. It takes 2 broken people and makes them whole together." Michael called up to them then, saying it was time to cut the anniversary cake. Clara and Keaton descended from the porch hand in hand, joining their celebration, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had built together. Later that night, after all the guests had gone home and the house was finally quiet, Clara and Keaton sat together on their bed, tired but content. Through the open window they could hear the night sounds of the ranch, cattle lowing softly, the whisper of wind through grass, the distant yip of a coyote. "You ever regret it?" Keaton asked suddenly. "Giving up the possibility of being a real doctor? I know you had the skill for it." Clara considered the question seriously. "No," she said finally. "I do not regret it. I have done good work here, helped countless people. Maybe I do not have the formal credentials, but I have the knowledge and the experience, and I have had this life with you, which I would not trade for anything." "You could still go to medical school," Keaton pointed out. "The twins will be grown in a few years. You are not too old." "No," Clara said again, more firmly. "That is not my path. My path is here with you, with our family, serving this community. I am content with that choice, Keaton." "More than content. I am fulfilled." Keaton pulled her close, and Clara rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. This was where she belonged, exactly where she was supposed to be. She had healed countless wounds over the years, mended broken bones and delivered babies and nursed the sick. But the most important healing had been her own heart, broken by loss and made whole again by love. The years continued their steady march. Clara and Keaton grew older together, their hair going fully silver, their movements a bit slower, but their love undiminished. They celebrated 30 years of marriage, then 35. Grandchildren multiplied and eventually great-grandchildren arrived. The ranch passed primarily to Thomas and his wife, though Keaton remained involved until his health forced him to step back. Clara worked at the medical practice until she was 60, then finally retired, training her successor with the same thoroughness her father had shown when teaching her. They spent their later years in gentle rhythms, sitting on their porch in the evenings, taking slow walks around the property, hosting Sunday dinners for their ever-growing family. They told stories to grandchildren and great-grandchildren, about the early days of McGill, about the blizzard and the wedding, about building the ranch from nothing. And always they held hands, their fingers intertwined with the ease of decades of practice. They still kissed each morning and each night, still said, "I love you" daily, never taking each other for granted even after more than 40 years of marriage. On a warm summer evening in 1922, 40 years after they had first met, Clara and Keaton sat on their porch watching the sunset. Keaton was 72 now, his body finally showing real signs of age, his breathing sometimes labored. Clara, at 69, still had her sharp mind and gentle hands, though arthritis had begun to affect her fingers. "Remember when I first saw you?" Keaton asked, his voice a bit breathless but still warm. "In Dr. Whitmore's office, looking so serious and competent. I remember thinking you were very stubborn for not wanting to show pain," Clara replied, smiling at the memory. "I was trying to impress you," Keaton confessed, as he had many times over the years. "Did not want you thinking I was weak." "I never thought you were weak," Clara assured him. "I thought you were brave. I still do." "We have had a good life, have we not?" Keaton said. "All those things we wanted that day by the creek, we got them all." "We did," Clara agreed. "We got everything and more." Keaton was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was thoughtful. "I am not afraid, you know, of what comes next. Because I know we will be together somehow, you and me. Death is not strong enough to break what we have." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. They did not often speak of death directly, though it was an increasingly present shadow. "I am not ready to lose you yet," she said, her voice catching. "You will never lose me," Keaton said firmly. "I am part of you, Clara. Always have been, always will be. And when my time comes, whether that is tomorrow or 10 years from now, I will go knowing I lived a full, rich life with the woman I loved more than anything in this world." "You are the love of my life," Clara whispered. "My heart, my home, my everything. These 40 years with you have been the greatest gift." "Not a gift," Keaton corrected gently. "A blessing. We blessed each other, Clara Mills." They sat in silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in glorious colors. Around them, the ranch they had built together settled into evening quiet. Somewhere inside the house, they could hear the sounds of Thomas's wife preparing supper, the laughter of grandchildren playing in the yard. This was their legacy, Clara thought. Not just the physical ranch or the medical practice, but this family, this love that had multiplied and spread to touch so many lives. Because she had healed a wounded cowboy 40 years ago, because he had ridden into a blizzard to save her, because they had chosen each other and built a life together. All of these people existed. All of these stories had unfolded. "Thank you," Clara said softly. "For what?" Keaton asked. "For everything. For walking into that doctor's office, for asking me to the social, for proposing, for building this life with me. For 40 years of love and laughter and partnership. Thank you for it all." Keaton lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "The pleasure and privilege were all mine, my darling. All mine." As darkness fell fully and the stars emerged in the vast Nevada sky, Clara and Keaton sat together on their porch, hands clasped, hearts intertwined, grateful for every moment they had been given. The wounded cowboy and the grieving doctor's assistant had found each other across distance and pain and loss, had healed each other in ways far deeper than physical wounds, had built a love story that would echo through generations. And if you had asked either of them, in that moment of perfect contentment and gratitude, they would have told you the same thing. That sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected beginnings, that healing works both ways, and that true love, once found, never really ends. It just grows and deepens, and becomes part of who you are, woven into your very soul, lasting far beyond the limits of a single lifetime. The story of Clara and Keaton Mills would be told and retold by their descendants for generations, a testament to the power of love, the importance of second chances, and the truth that sometimes, in healing others, we heal ourselves. And every time the story was told, it would end the same way, with the simple, profound truth that Clara had spoken all those years ago. Keaton had healed more than just her wounds. He had healed her heart, her soul, her very life, and in doing so, had shown her what it truly meant to love and be loved in return.